episode 41. Be the investor and not the CEO.
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
And I think we should be live to another totally fucking exciting week. I hope you are all billionaires by now, considering that we did the financial freedom exercise on Friday. So you should be in Bora Bora, bathing in the sun, or otherwise wasting your shitloads of cash. But jokes aside, it's a long road, as I outlined and mentioned repeatedly, and it doesn't happen overnight. And there may come a time, like for me, when, for instance, you realize that the life you are aspiring to isn't really that aspirable. I don't know if there's a word like that, but it gets to a stage where you start to contemplate whether all the work and the long hours and the investment into yourself and your business and the sacrifices are quite steep in that time of your life also, which is something, a lot of people disregard. They're like, yeah, I want to be rich at all costs. And it's a downer for some, or downer for some people. And in that context, I think you always have to kind of put that in a scale and determine for yourself whether you want to pursue this all the way, or if there comes a stage at your life where you can say, hey, I'm comfortable and I am financially free. And in that context, this is okay for me. I'm out. I'll let other people do the hustle. That in retrospect to Friday's episode, which brings us to today's episode. So it is noon on the 23rd of November, 2020. And I'm happy to welcome everyone to this quirky little show, really. I got feedback on my question whether I should accept guests, and the feedback was positive all the way. I think there was one remark that kind of burned in, but I'm not going to disclose that because it would be too unique. So let's get to today's show, which is called Be the Investor, Not the CEO. And this is really an interesting approach because simply based on a picture that I discovered, I think it was about 2017, that somebody shared that on the internet, in that they were the picture was comparing two actors in the Coca-Cola company. It's world famous. I think it was for many, many, many years the most valuable company and most recognized company on the planet. And in that regard, of course, nobody can say with, you can think what you will about the company, but you've heard of it. And more likely than not, you have had at least one of their beverages in your lifetime. If you're like me, you have several. So, you make them rich and richer pretty much every day by consuming their fizzy drinks or whatever, the water or whatever. They've got their fingers under pretty many skirts in regards to drinks. So the picture outlines, number one, James Quincey, who was in 2017 chief executive officer at Coca-Cola, and who had an annual income of $10.6 million, I think it was, something like that, 10.5, 10.6 million. I can't remember the picture entirely. But on the other side, there was one of Coca-Cola's major investors. It's a publicly traded company. So therefore, you have investors. And one of the biggest ones is Warren Buffett, who I think I need not to further introduce to a lot of, to pretty much every one of you who's listening to this has heard of Warren Buffett. Now, Warren Buffett holds a substantial stake in the Coca-Cola company. And in 2017, he made something close to $600 million in dividends alone. Now, for those of you who are not aware, when you buy a stock or a share, whatever nation you're from, you don't only participate from the increase of the stock's value at the stock market, but annually, or depending on the country you're in some countries it's quarterly. I think in the US it's actually quarterly. You get a check sent to you for, think of it as a thank you, for investing money into their company. So the company will send you a check as a thank you note saying, hey, thanks for investing in us. Here is amount X, which multiplies by the number of shares that you own, or no, do you own? I think you own them, or that you hold of the company. I think that's the more appropriate term. So Warren Buffett ends up with a check or a sum of $600 million, which he received just for parking his money inside that company. Now, these 600 or close to 600 million don't even reflect the amount of money he gained by the increase of the stock's value. That's, probably, given the size of the investment, quite another few, or probably a few other $1 billion that he received over the 20 years that he's held his Coca-Cola stock, and probably increased his portfolio. So I think we are at a time where the superficiality has actually overridden, in that, everybody's aspiring after these decision makers and chief executive officers and whatnot, and for all the blame that and number one, they're kind of put into this glory, that they're glorified significantly for their lifestyles and their decisions. And but you have to look at the downside. A job like that comes with significant responsibility, right? The corporation law in pretty much any country has exempted them from any the term penalty for wrongdoing, except for gross negligence, or if you screw up on purpose, then yeah, you can be held accountable. But in most cases, even if you get fired, you're kind of well kept. It's a small circle where you're handed around and you get the next job. And if you leave the company, you get your bonus or your golden handshake. For long story short, these guys are at least seemingly money makers par excellence. However, and that's the downside I wanted to mention. The responsibility that coincides with, or that comes with a job, as well as the significant amount of stress that comes with it, is something that shouldn't be neglected. And that kind of brings us back to what I mentioned earlier, in that it's worth considering actually doing or moving towards the investor side, which was the reason that I mentioned it so explicitly in Friday's episode. You can be the boss of your company, but you need to get to a stage where you can enjoy life, and you can enjoy life as an investor and pretty much as nothing else. Yes, there are those who say that, yeah, I like to work, I need the stress and whatever. And there are people like that out there. But a lot of times, and this was important for me, it's about personal development, and to have the time for that, to have the time to read books, to have the time to, do something with my hands, actually create something, rather than, being subject to personal power plays of some idiots that are in your way of achieving the goals for an organization that you work for, which only pays you a salary and as long as you're there. And the difference between that, of your James Quincy and your Warren Buffett comparison that we're currently at, Warren Buffett doesn't give a flying fuck. He's got his money in there. It's making money. He's got to make a decision if Coca-Cola seriously craps out to, purchase further stock, etc. But most of all, I think, and the most important thing to realize is that whatever he does, if he farts on a bus or barfs in a cinema, nobody's going to give a flying fuck. The stock price is not going to be affected. If, for instance, Warren Buffett were to sell his significant position in Coca-Cola, a lot of investors will know that a lot of other investors will assume that something is up and will follow suit. That's, of course, he's got power, but he is not he's not being glorified for that. He's not, more seldomly actually in a situation where he'll give or be forced to give interviews, to give autographs. Sorry, and this dude is just out of the picture entirely. And you can actually further increase that distance towards the publicity that comes with the job of a chief executive, in that you just say, okay, I'll just give you the money, make that it becomes more. That's of course a decision to make, and in that sense, you can refrain entirely. You can just enjoy your time with whatever you enjoy doing. If that happens to be work, and if you have been brainwashed that working for someone else is your thing, if you need that, go ahead. Totally up to you. But there will come a time when I believe you will ask the question of how your time is best invested. And for me, and I think in these troubling times for a lot of other people, it's going to be about finding yourself and actually finding your true purpose in this world. And I think in that sense, we can pretty much wrap this episode up. Now, as I said, having a job, however well paid it is, you're still subject to, public opinion and the decision of your of at least your shareholders. That's another very important thing to mention about Quincy. This dude is, if he, farts on the bus or whatever, does a public scandal or doesn't deliver the numbers that the investors request, he's gone, right? That's not true for the investors. The investors are going to stick around, right? Because they can leverage their power over the company through the investment and actually make a difference in that they kick this dude out. And that's another very comfortable feeling to have. So that being mentioned. Now, wrapping up, being the chief executive of a company, pays well, sure thing, and will probably shorten the time that you require to gain financial freedom, whatever this means to you. But make sure to use that money not on a private jet or on an expensive watch, but invest that money into whatever company you're comfortable with. Make sure to diversify your investment, not only in stocks of various companies, but also in real estate and land and whatever kind of suits your fancy. And that will then lead you to the situation where you can actually be a free human being, not report to anyone, etc., not be held accountable for anything you do, lay in bed all day if that's good for you, read books, as I mentioned, it's insanely important, and otherwise just have a good life. I think that's one of the most important aspects. In that sense, I wish you a good night. If you are west of me, and if you're east of me, I hope you've had, at least in parts, a successful day. If you haven't, well, let's see how we can make that better either today or tomorrow. If you're already in bed, I hope you've had a successful day. I wish you a good night, and I shall see you again tomorrow when we will be discussing about panic attacks and how to kill them. Peace out. Stay tuned.